I'm still a little clogged up, just a bit clogged up, which of course affects, my reflexes are slow.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of nodding off down here.
You're cloggy.
I appreciate your smacking me to keep me awake. Team player, Aaron McCarty.
We're joined by Jason Brown in studio, a candidate for Second Circuit Court of Appeals judgeship. The election is Saturday.
This Saturday.
Yes. Tell folks who don't know who Jason Brown is. Who is Jason Brown?
Met prior to today. Tell us about yourself.
Well, I mean, I'm born and raised here in Bossier. Been around for a long time. Graduated from Bossier High School. Been involved in the DA's office since I came back home to be a prosecutor. So I started in Bossier Webster Parish. I prosecuted here in Caddo Parish. Currently, I'm leading a federal task force, a state task force down in South Louisiana, combating narcotics, mostly the cartels from Mexico to New York.
I was just going to say, you mentioned came back home.
Came back home.
I'm always intrigued that people like myself who go away and then come back. Where did your travels take you? Why did you come back?
Well, I mean, I left home when I was 17 years old, went to college, and then I spent the next, about 10 years abroad, living overseas in various third world countries, serving down there. And I came back home in 2000 to be a prosecutor. In fact, I actually turned down a job in the Bush White House to come back home. And I kind of compelled to, I did so much overseas that I wanted to come home and do something for my community for once.
Jason, typically, excuse me, I'm calling you Jason. Is that okay?
Yes, please.
Typically, you're going to run for judge at a district court level, city court level. I mean, you're going right for the big enchilada.
Well,
you're
not really.
You're running for the Second Circuit, huh?
Well, I am, but there's this misconception that to be an appellate court judge, you should start as a district court judge. Well, the last two chief judges of the Second Circuit Court of Appeals didn't. They come from the ranks of district court judges. They actually came from the prosecutor's office. And there's a reason why a prosecutor is a better choice than a district court judge. You got to look at the experience. Experience makes a huge, huge difference. If you take a district court judge who, for example, may have been in politics, or maybe they were handling contracts or divorces, what's their experience level? When you get to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, the lion's share of the cases are really criminal cases. And you're talking about somebody who has to deal with deeply complex constitutional issues. And everybody is keenly aware now of how important these constitutional issues are when you look at, say, the Kavanaugh hearings in D.C., for example. This is where it matters. So you could have a choice where somebody doesn't have much experience as an attorney, or you could have one who has a lot of experience. I had over 100 jury trials. You would be hard pressed to find another attorney in town that's not a prosecutor to have anywhere near that. I'd be surprised if, I don't know how many my opponent has, but I have 100+ jury trials. I've argued before the Supreme Court of Louisiana and the appellate courts so many times I can't even count.
How do you feel about the criminal justice reform?
Oh,
we could talk about that an hour, I bet.
We could spend shows on that, and it's been a real problem. As a prosecutor, I always want to do reform. I think every year we have an opportunity to do reforms with the Law Institute and with the legislators. We propose bills and legislation to try to help. As a prosecutor in the courtroom, we see the issues that are facing law enforcement and the system every day, and those can be addressed. But what they did in Baton Rouge last year was they did a lot quickly without really thinking about it. And so it has really rendered our ability to do something about crime. It's impeded law enforcement, and we're seeing the effects now.
I have some friends who are lawyers, and they, to the man and or woman, will say, especially the experienced lawyers, they'll say one of the biggest problems in the legal system today is things like mandatory sentencing or the Justice Reinvestment Act. And they'll say 15, 20, 25 years ago, when they were younger lawyers, younger attorneys in court, that what's been taken away from the judges is the, I don't want to say opportunity, but how that the judge can weigh each case individually and look at the individual from all sides and not just have to open the book and say, okay, dude, sorry, you get 5 years.
Sure, the district court judge is in the best position to know the most about that individual defendant and can make the fairest and appropriate sentence. However, when you have mandatory minimums, it can create a situation where the judge can't do what he thinks is fair and appropriate. That's been a big problem. So you look at justice reform. The prosecutors are all in favor of reducing mandatory minimums on certain types of crimes and sentences to give the prosecutors and the judges the ability to fashion a fair and appropriate sentence for that individual. But instead of doing that, they took away the cap, the top of what you could do with a defendant. So we've reduced the amount of time that a person can serve for a crime who is a repeat violent offender, a person who's been in and out of the system dozens of times. I mean, you have a situation now where you could have somebody who could have 4 prior felony convictions before they do a day in jail. And you want to be able to do something on the upper end for those repeat offenders. I mean, I was featured in an ACLU propaganda piece about how harsh multiple offender sentencings can be. And in that case, I used a guy named Fate Winslow. And Fate Winslow was a guy that I'd prosecuted for selling drugs to an undercover police officer. But what was left out by the Daily Beast and by the New York Times was the fact that he was a 8th felony offender.
Goodness.
He had 7 prior felony convictions, and he in fact was a sex offender and a violent offender. So by the time that I got to him on his 8th felony offense, we definitely want to do something harsher to him. Under the new Justice Reform Act, we would not be able to punish that individual appropriately. He would only get a few years.
Death penalty. We're not using it. Do we need to do away with it?
Well, this is where the buck stops with the DA. If you want to look at the crime rates, and you want to, we just had an election in Shreveport last year, and the mayor took a pretty good beating over the crime rates rising. As a prosecutor, we accepted the responsibility of the crime rates. It really is us. Steve Prater and the sheriff's office and the Shreveport Police Department are doing a fantastic job. If the crime rates are going up, the buck stops with the DA's office. And it's the same thing on capital punishment. If you look over at Bossier Parish had multiple people who were convicted and sentenced to die over there. Every single person who was on death row by 1991 was executed. Their cases are done. They're final. The families have relief and can finally go away in peace. However, in Caddo Parish, every single person that has been convicted and sentenced by the juries to die in Louisiana, they're still on death row. Nathaniel Cote has been on death row since 1978.
You're blaming the DA for that?
It's absolutely 100% the DA's responsibility. And this is something that as a DA, I take the criticism for justly. We started in the Caddo DA's office a homicide unit. And one of the things that we were pushing with Judge Scott was we have to get these death penalty cases moving. If you allow criminal defense lawyers to drag it out, it'll never happen. And that's exactly what's happened. The DAs have to drive these cases. And the difference is night and day. You take a look at the previous DA over in Bossier Parish. He was able to get, from the time a crime was committed to the arrest and execution of the defendant, took 1.5 to 2 years. We're over here on Nathaniel Cote, and we're at 40 years.
You sound, pardon me, because we got to wrap it up. You sound like a man, and I mean this in the best way. You sound like a man on a crusade. How does being an appeals judge further your crusade?
Well, look, I am the guy that has upset the apple cart. I dared to stand up against the political machine, as it's called, or the swamp that's across the river. There are political elites that want to dictate to the citizens who becomes judge and who becomes DA and who becomes sheriff. I wanted to offer the people of Bossier and Webster Parish a choice, a good choice, someone who actually has the experience to be an appellate court judge. And I'm doing that for a good reason. I have been compelled throughout my entire career to fight political corruption. And right now, I'm up against it. And I think the citizens of Bossier...
You're up against it by your opponent, you think?
Well, I'm up against it by who's supporting my opponent. I'm not being backed by the DAs. Both DAs are backing my opponent. And when you take somebody like me who's been a DA and who's been prosecuting for 20-plus years, you have to look at why are these DAs not supporting me. You have the Caddo Parish DA who took $1.5 million of George Soros money. And as soon as he came into office, he got rid of 12 of the top homicide prosecutors, the best prosecutors there. I was out the door in 5 seconds. But you look at the crime rate soaring now in Shreveport. Look what's happened to our town over here. And it's directly related to that race. 4,000 cases were dropped by the DA as soon as he got into office. The death penalty cases are not going to go anywhere with the current administration. Don't look for that to have any kind of final culmination with anybody being executed ever. Look at over in Bossier Parish. I started my career investigating my own office. I found out that there were ADAs who were taking bribes in office. They took $1 million in cash money from defendants to reduce and dismiss their charges. And I exposed that. These are the people that are up against me. I'm the guy that will stand up for what's right and what's fair. Whether you're prince or pauper, everybody deserves the fair treatment of the law, no special treatment. And I'm not the guy that will do special treatment. So when you see the forces that are standing up against me, that's who is. They're standing up against me. My opponent is a super nice guy. I have nothing against him, but I believe that I'm the most qualified candidate, and I'm the candidate running against the swamp. I'm the guy running against the establishment that wants to dictate to the citizens of our parishes who gets to be judge and who gets to be DA.